Hello, hello. Good morning. G'day, guys. Sorry about the late start, and yes, I did get up late, and then I had bloody technical difficulties. I couldn't get my system to bloody run. So yeah. Good morning, Uncle Alf. I hope you're still here. There's only five of you. So let me just detach my. And I did invite some people, and I've probably pissed them off as well, because they are probably expecting to see me. No, it wasn't there. So I do apologise to everyone. Bit of a stuff up this morning. G'day, Alex. Lukey. I don't know what I've never had this error on my so I've had three type issues. One, I got up late, and then it was about 25 minutes in. So I slept through both my three alarms. It's probably because I went very late to bed last night as well, which didn't help. Then on top of that, so I do apologise to all those who have been waiting for an hour. Sorry. And then I had a bit of a stuff up with my system. So nothing went right this morning. That's what I was still fighting with my system. Nah, no mistake. Stuff up on my end. Take it away. It's a good story, Dom. Good story. I'll go with that for a while. Yes, I escaped these guys in black suits. They may still turn up and take me. You know me too well, don't you? That's it. That's it. Kitty, where's the ice cream? They're holding me hostage. And my ice cream as well. Well, you are holding my ice cream hostage. Oops. Go through that. No, I won't. That's Hello Kitty. Uh, oops. G'day, Bert. Have you started learning Russian yet? Спасибо. Нет. In terms of when I've learned anything. G'day, Ness. How is everyone else who's sort of probably stampeding in at the moment? Yeah, it's crazy what's happening in the US. It is really, really crazy and disturbing what is happening over there. It's personally, I think it's a really should be a big concern to all of us. As I said, I recently put it up on my community post. Basically about this whole situation. For those who haven't actually read it yet or whatever, what I posted. US new terror classification, a threat to the First Amendment. The US is moving towards becoming a fascist state. Biden's Homeland Security is reclassifying misinformation as an unsubstantiated claim about C-19 or election fraud as terrorism, as a threat to national security. That should be very disturbing to everyone around the world, because what America does, a lot of other countries then follow. And I've actually said, what WTF? No more First Amendment rights in the US to say wrong things. I mean, the whole concept of, democracy, freedom, and all that, and freedom of speech is basically to be able to say dumb things. Even basically Voltaire, said he'd fight for people who he disagreed with just for their right to say different things, even if they're dumb things. That's the whole concept of freedom of speech, that you can actually say dumb things, ridiculous things, or whatever. You can say the flat is Earth. You can say whatever you like. That's the whole purpose. This concept that they are always right, like the Chinese government, and everyone else who says something else is not following the narrative and they are wrong, and making freedom to say other things as a crime is ridiculous. And I've basically said, following into that is in conflict with government. That what they think, wrong thinking, is in conflict with government thinking. That sounds like something not even a Chinese government department would say. In China, if you disagree with the government, they reduce your social credits, or they send you to a re-education camp. Well, in the near future, in the US, if Biden gets his way, they will classify you as a terrorist and just lock you up in a maximum security prison. And if you're young enough, maybe with a sex buddy. I don't know what is worse, but they both sound as bad outcomes exactly for the person on the receiving end. The time has come for Americans to stand up and say enough is enough. Call your Congress and Senate representative and tell them enough is enough, and that you demand they dismantle the antidemocratic Department of Homeland Security. That department, since its creation, has limited and promoted policies to limit the freedoms of Americans severely. It's not there to protect people. It's there to basically, enslave people. I would call it, it's not homeland, it's not like Homeland Security, it's homeland enslavement. Well, that's what the sort of department is. And if they don't, they can kiss goodbye their Congress or Senate seats. You need to basically tell them how it is. You're not going to vote for them. Trudeau's playing these silly little games, controlling people's accounts and all that. How the hell does he get away? And how dare he basically take control of people's assets and stuff like that arbitrarily without a court decision or without legislation that gives him the right to sort of, like 2/3, like a referendum or whatever. He's just basically passing edicts which have nothing to do with reality. This is the same bullshit. This is the same bullshit. I'm going to reclassify who a terrorist is, who basically a wrongdoer is, who a criminal is, and I'm going to basically lock them up and get rid of them, or take away their assets, or limit their capacity to do anything. That's the sort of bullshit. So that's the main page this is February the 7th, 2022. This is the document. And you can actually see the sort of wording. We'll go to the document itself. Summary of terrorism threats to the US. The United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including the online. Listen to this language, including the online environment filled with false or misleading narratives and conspiracy theories. They consider that a terrorist threat. What a joke. The last time I believe a terrorist was wearing basically, some sort of Middle Eastern outfit and basically, telling if you're an infidel, they're going to knock you off. That's the last that I remember. not a US citizen that basically has an online account and has a different narrative to the government and may believe in conspiracy theories. I mean, there are people out there that believe in flat earth that I disagree with, but I believe they should have the right to be able to talk their nonsense, say whatever they like. As I said, I, if you're going to believe in freedom of speech, you should believe that people have the right to say stupid and idiotic things. As long as I'm not saying basically encouraging people to do acts of terror, or encouraging people to actually do criminal activities like to little children, or criminal activities by killing others, or snuff videos or stuff like that. That is basically covered by other legislation which says you can't do that. You can't sell drugs. You can't promote the selling of cocaine or something like that that's illegal because it's illegal under the law. That's not what we're saying here. These people are basically saying online filled with false or misleading narratives. That means they could actually tell us, like the Chinese government, what is a misleading narrative and what is false. So, and they basically say the other forms are misdisinformation. They call it misdis and malinformation. This is a new concept. It's called MDM, introduced or amplified by a foreign or domestic threat actor. So basically, people are now lumped. If you're an online, influencer that disagrees with the government, you're a domestic threat actor that disagrees with the narrative and basically says that the mRNA technology will probably harm people. And that's what did it in oncology. We provide the proof. So even if you provide the proof, if you're saying the opposite of what they actually believe, you're a bloody criminal, according to this. These threat actors, so now we're classified as threat actors, seek to exacerbate sociable fiction. So I'm actually out there promoting fiction, social fiction. How awful is that? To sour and disord and undermine public trust in government. Oh, there you go. Undermine public trust in government, institutions, and encourage unrest, which could potentially inspire acts of violence. Well, none of us are actually promoting acts of violence. We're just pointing out that the government actually is talking shit and actually, crap and stuff like that. I mean, the protesters up in Canada were peaceful protesters. The brutes were the people coming in and actually breaking up the peaceful protesters. They were basically the brutes. But you can actually hear the language undermining public trust in government. Well, if government basically did their job right, we wouldn't have to criticize them. So you can't even criticize the government anymore because that's undermining trust in government. And that means you're a terrorist if you do that. What a load of bullshit. This is the sort of language, this is basically the sort of language you have in China, that these people are undermining, national security. They're undermining, the government. They are bad people. They're working for foreign actors because they're saying something similar or criticizing the government. So they must be in league with the foreigners. Whether they are or not is irrelevant, but they must be, because since they disagree with the government. So if you agree with the government, you're a foreign agent as well, according to this document. So you're basically stuffed. You've basically got no right to actually disagree with the government. That's what they're actually saying in this document. It's ridiculous. And you can see this. Key factors contributing to current heightened threat environment include the proliferation of false and misleading narratives which sow disorder or undermine public trust in US government institutions. Well, those US government institutions have done that themselves with their misbehavior, their secrecy, and basically putting out and mass vaccinating millions of people with experimental stuff forcibly. For example, they're giving examples. This is widespread online proliferation of false and misleading narratives regarding unsubstantiated widespread election fraud and COVID-19. Grievances associated with these themes inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021. No, they didn't. Malign foreign powers have and continue to amplify these false and misleading narratives in an effort to damage the United States. Bullshit. It's the United States government that's basically lying to its population. It's the United States government that's providing misleading information on all these issues and people out there. Now, there are some crackpots and crazies out there. Yes, I would agree with that are basically saying all sorts of things. And, that is a very small minority. The majority of us basically are telling it how it is, that these people are doing just bullshit. So, but you can see the language. It's a very generalized language, not specific. They're not saying, there are groups in the United States that are basically have violent intentions and they're promoting this sort of stuff. They're actually just saying that they're lumping everybody together, whether you're one of those little small minorities of lunatics. They're lumping those and other people who are basically amplifying and sort of working in cahoots. Not that I basically am involved in the organization, but just because I may say things that are in a disagreement with the US government, I must be in bed with them. I must be basically allied to all these other nasties out there. What a load of nonsense. This sort of generalized language is very dangerous. This is a sort of language which basically guilt by association that China says, if you agree with something, you must be part of that group. So if I disagree with the government, I must be a terrorist, irrespective of whether I'm involved in such an organization, because I disagree with the government on certain issues, which other groups that may be a bit crackpotty out there that want to do those sort of actions may, and they may be a small minority. So if 100 people are out there and there's a small 2 people that are actually, slightly deranged and think that violent, the other 98 are also associated with that, with those 2 crazies, because that's a sort of generalized language. This is dangerous language to talk in those way. You should basically, you're guilty, not by association, you're guilty if you've actually done an actual crime. These people are basically saying that you're guilty, like the Chinese government says, and you lose your social credits, like well, in a sense, well, they just lock you up in a maximum security prison with a sex buddy. Is that what they're doing? So, and they go, continued call for violence at US and critical infrastructure. Well, I don't hear a lot of people actually, and this is, and then they basically say that all these people, they're lumping all these people together with these violent sort of, foreign terrorists, and then the same of these actors do so to encourage unrest. So basically, you can see they're combining, they're talking one foreign terrorist organization and domestic threat actors. So they're combining the 2 together. They're not the same. So a domestic threat actor now is somebody on YouTube that basically disagrees with the government. They're basically identified as equally dangerous as a foreign terrorist organization. Well, actually, most of the foreign terrorist organizations like Bin Laden and all those sort of groups, they were financed by the CIA, by the US government. They were the people that put into power. And then they went to Doha in Qatar and basically handed over Afghanistan to the Taliban and all those nutcases. Remember? These are the people telling us that basically that they're the ones associating with terrorists and putting them back into power, and then basically telling us that we're supposedly, because we disagree with the US government, we're supposedly just as equal as those nasties. What a load of crap. Continue to amplify pre-existing false misleading narratives online to sow disorder and undermine public trust in government institutions. Some of these actors do so to encourage unrest. No, they don't. I don't. Many other people don't. We just basically tell people to go out and protest. The last time I heard protesting was, permissible under democracy. It wasn't an illegal thing to protest, but apparently now it is. Sounds a bit like China. You can't protest, otherwise you get sent to a re-education camp. In this case, you get sent to a maximum security prison if you protest anymore, which could lead to acts of violence. I mean, being on the road and actually screaming at some idiot, basically, that just tried to run you over, could also, end up in something like that. But that's part of human life, against facilities, individuals, institutions, and organizations cited above. Oh, yes, how awful. Violent extremists inspired by a range of grievances and ideologies continue to target crowded venues, traditionally perceived to be soft targets, such as commercial and public access facilities, public gatherings, certain governments and state facilities, and houses of worship. Well, there are probably some groups, and I wouldn't say all of us. There are probably some very limited minorities that basically have these really strange ideas, but the domestic actors on YouTube, online actors, are basically not part of that. Because if they were, well, oh, that's right. YouTube actually allows them. Remember, Facebook and YouTube and all that allowed all the terrorists around the world to basically communicate among themselves and promote their videos and all that. Yeah, that's exactly right. So aren't they basically the real ones that are actually supporting those sort of nasties? But no, it's us. It's us who disagree with the government. No, it's us that disagree with the government. So basically, if you've got grievances or ideological differences with the government, you're basically a terrorist now. So you're all lumped together. You're all bloody terrorists, just letting you know. So yeah, that's the sort of language where, and their threats to and then they've got here, as COVID-19 restrictions continue to decrease nationwide, increase access to commercial and government facilities, rising number of mass gatherings could provide increased opportunities for individuals looking to to commit acts of violence to do so. Well, that could happen anywhere in the world under any circumstances, often with little or no warning. Meanwhile, C-19 mitigation measures, particularly the mandates, have been used by domestic violent extremists to justify violence in 2020. So basically, people protesting against this unacceptable sort of behaviour, are basically, and this is pretty much it. What's actually happened? Just give me a sec. People trying to call me in the morning. So it is quite disturbing what is actually happening at the moment. So this is the report. People can read the rest of the rest of it and all that sort of stuff. So basically, if you disagree with the American government in different ways, you're basically now classified, as some of those people. I mean, the last time I remember, these threat actors in Afghanistan were the ones that were put into power by the US government through their secret agreement that eventually got out in Doha recently, not too long ago. They were the ones that actually put the Taliban and actually left them with $80 billion worth of kit to basically terrorize the region. Oh, how nice of the US, And they probably provide far less to other countries within the NATO alliance. It's like pittance, a couple of million here, 100 million or 200 or 300 million there, or whatever, as support for countries that have got weaker, defense budgets or whatever. But they, our dear friends here, the Taliban, we need to give them 80 billion worth of kit. I mean, such nice people. We had such a good, interesting meeting with them in Doha. So basically, that's the sort of bullshit we're actually getting that continues to this day. And these people are lumping real criminals and real terrorists together with actual people online and stuff like that disagree with the government. That's the sort of language that's actually being used, and it's quite disturbing that we're getting this sort of language, this sort of combination of themes that are being pushed. It's very ridiculous nonsense. Yeah, they did. Many Americans did, unfortunately, but they need to basically start putting the screws. They need to get rid of this department. This department is a dangerous department. It's a very dangerous department. They do have the FBI. They have other organizations to deal with any such threats, terrorist threats and the like. They do not need this organization. This organization has when you create a government department, it has a mission, and that mission can become all encompassing. Then they try to basically, once you get legislation in, this is what I say to people, legislation can be very dangerous, like a double-edged sword, supposedly protecting you, but in reality, stripping a whole lot of your rights away. And that's what this organization has been doing, methodically moving to strip people's rights. And pretty much the people of the US have lost a lot of rights. Now, they probably will take this down, I suspect, this video. I wouldn't be surprised. But it needs to be said. Yeah, Orwell has a name for that kind of thing. Exactly. Yeah. Anybody that remembers, if you can't put out compelling information to debunk misinformation, then perhaps you are the one who is lying. Exactly. And that's exactly it. They are the ones with secrecy. They are the ones that are basically providing protection rackets for pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, 75-year protection rackets. They are the ones that are basically misinforming the public. What we are doing is trying to use freedom of information and other methods of getting that information and pointing these discrepancies out, or N of one experiences, or the old oncology data, like I did, that the actual people in cancer, therapeutics were actually warning their clients that there are risks with these interventions and these treatments. Did you hear anyone in the US government say there are risks? No. Even though there is ample evidence of case studies that actually showed such risks of mRNA technology. But absolutely not one word from the US government. And now a judge in the US is actually compelling that information to come out. And we've actually seen some of that information. And it's quite disturbing because they were well aware that there are a lot of side effects. And you go, well, why are young people that don't seem to have poor outcomes, why are they basically being mass vaxxed? It's a legitimate question to ask. It's not basically a terrorist question. It's not basically an act of insurrection. It's a legitimate in a democracy to ask, why are these people mandating these things when the evidence now coming out doesn't look very good? That's the reality. My mate tells me stuff. I ask him for his sources. It's all secondhand information, which is a lie, which is lies. This is the problem with our world currently. Governments are basically lying to us. Corporates are lying to us or misinforming in different ways, or giving us half truths, or completely the opposite for propaganda purposes. And then they've got the audacity to say that, general citizens, US citizens or foreign citizens potentially, because you know how the American system works, like with WikiLeaks, the guy with WikiLeaks was classified as a terrorist as well, even though the guy just basically put out information about some of their criminal behaviors in Iraq. I look back at history I remember the governor of Smyrna, he actually brought up on charges back in the 1920s Greeks who basically had, you know, killed Turks. He brought them up on charges. And even when the government changed, he was left there. And that is the way you go. That is why those forces had credibility. And even the foreign correspondents at the time said that, but he was criticized by the Greek media at the time that he was being, but he took action against those individuals that did the wrong thing. Have you ever seen, any of the US people that have done inappropriate things tried? I haven't seen any. It's like a protection racket to this day. So that's the problem. That's the problem when you've got a government that basically doesn't do the action. There's a contrast. I gave you as an example where one chief government officer says, no, if you do, a walk, you do a crime against other people, you're going to be charged for those crimes. And that's the problem that we have in this world currently, that there's a big protection racket because it goes against the narrative of the state. So anybody associated with the state can literally do whatever they like nearly. Well, I wonder as well, and I wonder how people like Trudeau ever got there. But if you take a look at their history, they were associated with all these nasties, that you find in the World Economic Forum and many others who are in bed with these very nasty individuals who basically want to make sure that none of us own anything, that they asset strip the whole planet and they own everything and we're just serfs while they are the new masters of the new aristocracy of the planet, and they tell us how to live our lives, feed us kibble, keep us in their controlled cities. That's the sort of agenda that these people have. That's the real agenda. This so-called, that we need to control, the narrative. That's, they're not saying it outright, but they say that these are the state actors that have a different narrative than the American government of a threat to national security. So if you have a different opinion than the government, you're a threat to the national security. That sounds very like a totalitarian system. It doesn't sound like a democracy. So if you disagree, you're basically a terrorist now. You're basically classified as, as a non-state actor that basically is a threat to national security of the United States. So all basically real nasty people and people legitimately criticizing the government now being all lumped together as a threat to the US government. That's pretty abysmal, pretty bad. So Gavitt, UK health minister was saying most critical cases in hospital were unabated. It was only 300-ish people, and they took dates from these, and the jabber was even offered crazy. Oh, look, yeah, I know it's crazy. Most of these people have already had, if you take a look at even in Israel, most people are basically on their fourth Jabba the Hutt incident. And the majority now in hospitals over there have had double, triple, or quadruple jabs. So I actually did a video showing bad outcomes if you've done too many because, its effects on the immune system. Not a good thing. They are masters of projection, exactly. They are exactly masters of projection. Whatever they accuse us of, it's actually they who are the ones guilty of it. Precisely. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go around basically doing a deal with the Taliban. I didn't go around funding Bin Laden. I didn't go around doing anything. It was the US government that did all that. They financed them, they backed them against the Soviets at the time, and then once they finished with the Soviets, those criminal organizations, then they turned against their their Western threat because they hate everyone who is not like them. How could you think that you could get into bed with evil people that hate you as much as they hate your enemy and basically finance them to attack your enemy and not think that they're not going to come back and attack you later on? How ridiculous. These are the people that financed all these nasties around the world. And then if we disagree with them, they lumped us together with them. How ridiculous is that? Exactly. Masters of projection. Definitely. Yes. 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 Very much. Very much so. Yes, that's why they projected racism in the Republican Party. It's clear they're past. Yeah, look, that's just made up shit. It's made up shit. As if people who disagree with them, oh yeah, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, and everything else under the sun if you disagree with them as well. So you're classified all these things just because you disagree with them. I mean, there are even people who have black skin that are being classified that way because they disagree with the US government or Trudeau or whatever. And the last thing I can remember is it's Trudeau that basically painted his face black and did a comedy sketch. Projection as well, Mr. Trudeau. Projection. These are the people that come around. It's like Harry from the royal family, wearing a Nazi sort of uniform, and then criticizing now us and basically making remarks. Best thing that the Queen ever did is do away with him because basically he's a twat. He's an absolute woke twat. Don't know why people even bother with him. Great. We're started mobilizing on Bart's Discord. We are looking for alternative platforms. Discord, upcoming new TOS will result in heavy pushback on free speech. We might move to Gilded. Yep. People need to move from those sort of platforms that are basically are anti-free speech platforms. I call them anti-free speech. I call them basically authoritarian platforms. We need to start calling them what they are. Let's start calling them, authoritarian platforms because that's what they are in that regard. Bloody hell. And another. So that's off. And my brother wants to go for a walk, but I sent him a message anyway last night. Okay. That was just a reminder that I'd actually set up. Stephen, great to hear you branching out into world affairs. Keep up the good work, Harry. Thanks, Stephen. Presidential administration have been a train wreck here in the US border crisis. Inflation, Afghan disaster, plant-based narrative, woke narrative, gender swapping, and taking out Christ in America. Basically, exactly. These demonic people, because that's what they are, they basically, and if you say that, I've just probably been classified now as an evil doer against the US government. But that's what they are. They're basically promoting this narrative of transsexualism and transgenderism and all this sort of nonsense, which the rest of us, if people want to believe that stuff, that's their business. Again, I believe in the freedom of people to basically believe crazy things. But when it's shoved down your throat by the government, and if you disagree with it, you're a bad, basically they are denying you the right to disagree with that agenda. And it's basically, again, plant-based narrative. Yep, shove down, eat your kibble and shut the fuck up is basically the agenda. So if you're promoting carnivore diet, you must be a terrorist as well. So if you disagree with a disastrous, promoting, if you disagree with the government's handover to the Taliban of Afghanistan, you must be also a bad person. Yes, inflation they cause because of their woke attitude by preventing investment in the fossil fuel industry. What's happened is their little shit crap windmills and solar panels are just not performing up to scratch. And they've actually asked for people to de-invest in these things. And as the increase in energy demand has gone up, we've got a crisis on our hands. It's not only these rises in energy inflation was actually happening before the crisis, which the US government started. Because let's not forget, the government in Russia, in the Ukraine, was basically a government that it was majority was the people who voted for it were Russian speakers. Let's just cover this quite clearly. In the Ukraine, up until the coup that was organized by the CIA and these nasties who basically have overthrown the previous government. See, the majority of the population in the Ukraine, because back in the Soviet Union time, they decided to lump a whole lot of Russian regions in with the Ukraine for administrative reasons. And that ended up creating this enlarged Ukraine that never existed historically. As a consequence, when the Soviet Union fell apart, they illegally broke up the union. It's like a couple of states in the US deciding to break up the United States. Well, that's exactly what happened to the Soviet Union. They should have had a referendum and legally split the union up and the territories and everything else. But that didn't happen. It was just three leaders that basically decided to pull the whole thing apart illegally. And like Yeltsin and a few others, and they were all backed by the US. The end of that day, what happened was the Ukraine ended up with a majority population being Russian speaking. And so they kept on voting in Russian speaking, pro-Russian people. So the Americans decided, well, we're going to do a coup. They organized a coup with the Western Ukrainian, what was part of the real old Ukraine. And they overthrew all the Russian speakers, kicked them out of parliament, the Duma, and got rid of the president as well. It was a coup, a quite outright coup. And up to this day, none of these people in the East have any voting rights. They can't vote. So if you're a Russian speaker, you got zero vote. So the only people that get elected is this. And this current president has got a battalion of Nazi units inside his army that are terrorizing the people in the East. Yes, exactly. We're supporting Nazis now, the Biden administration in the Ukraine and his family that are in cahoots with that regime. And pretty much they are actually creating this instability in that whole region that has a risk of blowing up in our faces. Do you remember? Do they seem to forget the Afghanistan situation, the Iraqi situation, what a mess they made in all these regions? Well, they're doing the same thing again now. But the problem is Russia's got nuclear weapons. That creates a very dangerous situation. These people are playing with fire and destabilizing that. Now, what Russia's doing, declaring, accepting the declaration of these as that was under pressure by the Duma in Russia. I don't think that helps. But let me put it this way. Putin is a moderate. Actually, a lot of the people, the hardliners in Russia, in the parliament and in the deep state of Russia, actually have even called him a Western stooge. He tried to basically negotiate with Russia, with the Americans ages ago. He even wanted to join NATO years ago. Basically, he wanted to normalize relationships with the West. It's the West that told him no, no, no. And now the deep state is pressuring him to take action against the West. So he's the person who's actually moderate compared to the others, because the Russians have had enough, and their deep state has had enough. They're not going to be pushed around by the deep US state. That's what's really happening. We're used as pawns in these conflicts between the wealthy and powerful elites of the two deep states who are pushing back against each other. That's what's happening. The Ukraine is just a new area. I mean, just look at the numbers. There are only two armies in Europe that have actually got enough military capacity to withstand Russia. One is Poland, and the other one is Greece. They've got over 1,000 tanks each, and Greece probably has more modern tanks compared to Poland. Where Germany's probably got about 400, France has probably got about the same. They've disarmed their military, because they for their woke agenda and their environmental agenda and everything else. But Russia, on the other hand, has got 10,000 tanks. They could sweep right through to the English Channel. The only thing is they don't have the economic capacity to sustain that. That's the reality. So if Russia was really, really threatening us, and they switched over to a war economy, could they get to the English Channel? Potentially, with the amount of weaponry they've got. So is there a real threat, or is it basically a whipped up, with all these American and NATO troops inside the Ukraine, basically whipping up this conflict? Who's actually really whipping up this conflict? It's quite crazy that people would announce invasions, announce basically military action, and announce all these things. The last thing I remember is people do these things secretively, quickly, without telling anyone. But apparently, the Americans get all these announcements and just tell us, so it's interesting, to say the least. It's a weird situation. That's what's happening. They've created a lot of this disaster. That is the real. And what Bruce is saying, about this other part, Christ in America, yeah, forget it. He's been excised out of the system a long time ago, pretty much. So, yeah, but that's the current agenda. Yeah, and it's not getting any better. Anyone who disagrees, please just keep an open mind. We all have opposite opinions, but we can still all talk. Exactly. I have no problems in talking with people that basically believe in the COVID government narrative. I'll sit down and have a civil conversation with them. But these people are also being deceived by their government, told that these other people that disagree are enemies of the state. So people's attitude has changed, because they're like, if you go back in, the Hitler Youth, they were basically inspired to hate Jews or hate other people that disagreed with their party line. Well, this is the way the Democrats are behaving at the moment in the US, and these woke individuals. They're going around and basically telling the rest of us they're using their reptilian brain, not engaging their frontal lobe, because when you're on a kibble diet, you disengage the frontal lobe, the actual use your brain, and you basically hate, and you basically point the finger. This is what they were doing back in the 1930s, Jew, Jew, Jew. Basically, we're the new Jews, and they're just pointing the finger, denier, denier, denier. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. The same narrative is being played out, the same bullshit narrative. If you disagree with the government, you're a denier. If you disagree with the government, you're basically the new Jew. I'm waiting to receive my new green star, or what is it? Probably black star. That's right, black star. That I'm an evildoer. Yes, black star. From the government, so I can put on my chest so people know that I'm a evil nasty person that disagrees with the government and should be pointed out. You bigot, you bigot, you bigot, by the the master race of the Democrat Party, the woke brigade, the new master race, which is the woke brigade, and they will point out to me that I'm a bigot and a bad person. I should be locked up or even potentially eliminated because I'm a threat to national security. Yes, exactly. Yes, the problem seems to be the West sees China and Russia as the threats and not as partners, precisely. Even though these people have basically asked to be partners and the US has told them no. When Russia asked to join NATO, it was told no. See, if Russia was part of NATO, they wouldn't have felt a threat if NATO expansion had actually happened, because basically NATO members do not attack other NATO members, or technically they shouldn't. Unless you're Turkey, you can get away with anything. Because basically the deep state in the US likes to use Turkey to do its dirty work, money laundering. It's a narco state that funnels dirty money for the West, funnels weapons for the West, and funnels drugs for the West. So Turkey plays a special pivotal role. That's why it can get away with any, getting into bed with ISIS terrorist acts and buying oil from them. Not a problem if you're Turkey. It's only recently that Erdogan's sort of gone to his head all this sort of freedom to do all these actions. But even now, still, Biden is being, you haven't seen any sanctions. I mean, what basically Erdogan did, what the Turks did by invading into Cyprus is basically exactly what they're criticizing the Russians of doing. But I don't see any actions against such players. On the opposite, it was actually supported by America. The incursions into Syria, that's an incursion, and into Iraq, that they are sovereign countries. They've never threatened Turkey, and Turkey just invades into those territories. Well, that's illegal under international law, but they can go in there to protect certain people, but the Russians can't. It's like double standards. That's the problem. But remember, they use the Turks to basically do their dirty little things in Central Asia, so they need them. So if you're like as Lyndon Johnson used to say, they're our bastards. Yes, they may be nasties, but they are our nasties. So they can do whatever they like as long as they're our nasties. That's the real ideology. So basically, yeah, we're always been lied, for a very long time. Now they're basically saying that if you disagree with our lies, you're a terrorist now. So basically, they've gone next level. So before, you could disagree with Lyndon Johnson and say, well, you're in bed with these nasties, and criticize Lyndon Johnson and other people like that. But now, if you criticize the Biden administration and say you're in bed with nasties, and you're, in cahoots and doing all these things, now you are the terrorist. You're the bad person. Yes. Very much like, yeah. G'day, Joe. So, I mean, what Trump tried to do is he understood that Russia's not really a threat. If they wanted to basically steamroll across, they have the capacity because most of Europe has disarmed itself. So he's not a real threat. But the Democrats, when they came in, they still have the Brzezinskyites in the State Department, and these people are just hostile to the Russians, absolutely hostile. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, they haven't had a new enemy, and they've really wanted to go back to their old enemy. So they've actually continually pushed NATO easterly, and tried to actually ring fence in Russia to threaten her. It's no different than the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is very similar, when you basically bring weapons right to somebody's backyard and say, I'm going to threaten you. Well, that was an existential threat. See, the US is quite selective. Back then, when the Russians were threatening them, they were saying, we've got the right to invade any country that threatens us. I thought it was illegal to do that under international law. But it's okay for the Americans. But if the Russians do it, which they haven't done it yet, if the Russians do it, then it's illegal. But it's not illegal for the Americans to do it. You see the double standard here? I mean, Putin's pointed this out, but any idiot with with half a brain cell, but if you're only engaging the reptilian brain, not the frontal lobe, then basically, yes, you can believe anything that the government tells you in the US. But if you engage your frontal lobe, even if you've got one or two brain cells left after an intoxicating night, you can still work out that it's bullshit. So yeah, but otherwise they still want you to go and fight as cannon fodder for their misadventures. So yes, divided in 3 blocks, if memory serves me right. And each of these of those people had to be constantly reminded that they are in war, threatened by the other two. Exactly. That's pretty much where the situation is. And yes, cannon fodder for the elites, pretty much. And they're all united. They're all friends. They all do business together. Thank you very much. But we're the enemies. Yes. All that happening now is distraction. They can push their agenda. Ukraine, yeah, gender, fuel price, yeah. Well, fuel prices is what they created. See, they've got an agenda, and their agenda is to basically force up asset prices. So they've got a crisis. For a very long time in the past, you usually used to have the normal cycles of the boom bust cycle. So you would bust those people who are misbehaving in the marketplace would take them out. And you could reset the system. You can't do that now, the economics. They don't want that to happen. So what they're doing is they've been using for quite some time what is called just debt, and more debt, unsustainable levels. But what's been masking that, as the currency devalues, the US dollar and many other currencies around the world, by doing the same strategy, so they all fall into the same situation because of technological innovation, computerization, and other things of productivity like cheap oil and gas. It's masked this devaluation because actually, as the production of goods and services becomes cheaper, the currency also is being devalued. So you don't notice the inflation because it's being masked by productivity. But they went all woke on us in the last couple of years now and said, no, we're going to go to windmills and all this. They cut their own throat because their strategy was that you would own nothing and you'd be happy. They'd own everything. How would they own everything? Well, it's simple. If you basically print money and you basically appreciate all the assets of the world as this macroeconomic strategy, what you do is you make everything, stocks, housing, land, very expensive, which means that the only mega rich can buy it all. That means you will own nothing and they will own everything, and you'll live in a rentier society while they'll control all the mega cities, the land, and they'll feed you what they want, and they will basically, you will work for them and that you will rent from them like a serf did in the past. It's the new serfdom. It's basically the new, it's basically the new future. That's the new future. The new future is you're the serf. You basically live in their little units. You eat what they tell you to eat. You listen and believe what they tell you to believe. And you basically are a good social citizen, a good global citizen with good social credits. Got it? That's your future. That's the future that they're really telling you. Anybody that disagrees with that is a terrorist. Anybody that disagrees with that narrative is basically a bad person, according to Biden and many others of that establishment. So they're pricing everyone out of existence. Their big mistake was that they brought on this green new bullshit too early. And now, because they weren't expecting a lot of these other situations to occur and this magnification of inflation, they caught themselves pantsed, basically. They pantsed themselves with they're not that bright. Let's be honest, and their strategy has slightly come undone, where potentially they could create conditions of hyperinflation. Now they're actually out there like mad In Europe, they're using like, they're back to using petroleum. I mean, diesel generators, petroleum, and other things like that. These are all these green, so-called greenies. They're actually out there using, coal-fired power stations. They haven't turned them off. They've actually turned on some in Germany, all this sort of stuff, because they fucked up big time with their strategy, their super cities that they would control. They stuffed up. And now they have to basically walk back a bit and use all this, it's a crisis, we have to do this temporarily and all that, because it works against the narrative. And they try to use smoke and mirrors to basically, so people don't look. But if you go and start looking at the increase in some of these other old traditional fuels, they're going up. And the governments are basically mandating these things. Why? Because they need to basically protect their money printing. If they don't protect their money printing, they can't, their agenda can't be run. It undermines, because if you get stagflation or hyperinflation, what do you think is going to happen to these governments? They're going to be out. They're scared. So now they're bringing in policies. If you disagree with them, you're a terrorist. They need to basically silence the masses. That's what this strategy is. Silence the masses so we can basically do our little reset. That's what it's all about, guys. That's what it's really all about. The fuel prices, everything. That's all about. They stuffed up, and now they have to sort of fix the course. They're on a trajectory to basically change the world and reset it the way they want to, not the way we want it, but the way they want it. And they did stuff up a bit here and got themselves caught out with high inflation. They weren't expecting that, but they stuffed themselves up. They thought, with the increases of automation and technological and all this and robotics and stuff like that, it will keep ahead. But they didn't realize that that demands a lot of energy. So they really poorly organized. That just shows you that they're not as smart as they think. Unfortunately, I heard so many different stories about Ukraine. It's hard for the average Joe to know what's going on exactly. But if you take a look, I say go back to the elections, the older elections, and you'll see there were always Russian leaders that were actually Russian speakers that were basically, and the majority of the people in the parliament were Russian speakers until that so-called revolution, the Ukrainian revolution, which was really a coup organized by the CIA. Thank you very much. And now the eastern part has no voting rights. It's a bit like, remember South Africa, and how one group who was black had no voting rights and the other group who was white had voting rights. Well, it's the same sort of thing. If you speak Ukrainian, you've got voting rights. If you speak Russian, you've got no voting rights. You don't even have representatives in the parliament, and your parties are made illegal. Well, that's fascism. And there's a fascist battalion in the Ukrainian army, well known. You can Google it. Wikipedia will actually even give you all the information. Nazi battalion, Ukraine, just Google that. You'll find the information. Very easy for anyone to find. Apparently, the British military also, and the Canadian military also, helped these units in their training. Yes, the great bastions of democracy and freedom, the British and Mr. Trudeau as well, a great leader for democracy. Yes, his military advisors in the Ukraine were actually training these people. Yes, such great Democrats. Yes, lovers of freedom. Yes, being ex-armed corps myself, when doing vehicle recognition, we would be told that if you see this tank and have somehow gotten past divisions or other tanks, in other words, you're screwed. Exactly. Yeah, look, I've got many of my relatives have been in the military. My father was in the military for 3 years, so I'm not against. I'm very much supporting, and even my nephews, I've got in the military in Australia. So I'm very much supportive of it's the governments that misuse these forces as cannon fodder for their misdeeds and nefarious things. It's those people. Every country needs a military. We need national defense. We need basically people to defend us against anyone. If you get rid of your military, other people in the neighborhood that may be, less than democratically minded or freedom loving may get ideas. So you definitely need every country. But there's a difference between having one and then using it for nefarious purposes with what a lot of governments have done in recent times, unfortunately. Yeah, they are quite huge. They're bloody huge as I said, most of Europe is disarmed. If the Russians really were that much of a threat, really wanted to, they could have overrun. No, nothing to do with it. Let me just explain what's really happening so you guys really understand ultimately what is really happening in this part of the world. This has nothing to do with the Ukraine. The Ukraine is just being used as an excuse. This country is going to basically be turned upside down to play out the narrative. The real reason is that up until very recently, while the Americans were involved in their anti-terrorist activities in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other parts of the world, they took their eye off their allies. So what happened is their allies said, "Well, there's no real threat anymore with the Russians. We'll disarm." And then they started making trade deals and commercial deals with the Russians. I mean, if you take a look, what do you think? Macron, the French leader, keeps on going back and forth to Russia. It's not accidental. He's trying to get a deal. He's desperate to get a deal. But why is he desperate to get a deal? One simple reason. His banks, many of the French banks, are heavily invested in Russia. They stand to lose a lot of money. Then the Germans and many other investment companies are heavily invested in Russia. Some of the previous, German leader, chancellor, was basically Schmidt, people like that. They're basically on the board of Gazprom, which is the big Russian energy company. Many of the Germans. That's why that German who was basically in officer from I believe from the Navy that was in Russia said what he said. They've been involved, and the thing that they don't want, the Americans, or let's say the Anglosphere, which is really the British, because most of it, like the City of London controls most of the world finance. You've probably heard about very rich individuals like the old Rothschild families in the past. Well, that family, to a large extent, is sort of, they diverged. They're not that powerful anymore. Some of the members are, but they literally broke up the fortune amongst the family, and many of them have gone their own ways. But some of those elements are still there, plus a number of other very wealthy individuals, like a number of the American tech giants and tech billionaires and financiers and all that. They all operate out of the City of London, all these people. It doesn't matter whether they were the Rothschilds in the past and whether some of the Rothschilds are still involved or not. That's irrelevant. That's just smoke and mirrors of the far right using that sort of language because they just, they're anti-Jewish. That's why. I'm not anti-Jewish. But a number of these people are operating out of the City of London. Things like, we're talking about well over $50 trillion. It's way bigger than the American economy. Who's pushing this agenda, this anti-Russian agenda? It's these banking elites in the City of London. And basically, I don't want to use this sort of language, but the Americans are viewed as hillbillies with weapons that they can drag around the world and they can use as cannon fodder. But it's the City of London and their banking links from New York that basically run the world. Well, they run, before it was sterling, now it's the US dollar's reserve currency. So if you control the currency, you can actually sanction other nations that disagree with you. So it's basically these banking elites that are basically primarily in the City of London, which the City of London is like an autonomous region, a bit like the Vatican, a banking Vatican. That's what it is, an autonomous region. Can't even be touched by the British government. These people basically run the world out of there. They have for a long time with their friends in the Anglosphere, in the New York and a few other places around the world. And most of the banks, take a look at the City of London controls all the banks in Hong Kong, Singapore. These are the big exchanges, the actual, big exchanges around the world where money flows between these exchanges, these massive exchanges. And all these transactions are dealt with the Bank of International Settlements, another bank that was set up by the British years ago, the Bank of International Settlements, where they could actually trade through Switzerland with the Nazis. Yes, they traded behind the back of the British people that were being dyed as cannon fodder in the Second World War. Yeah, these people were trading with the enemy, supposedly. That's what really was actually happening. And that's what's been happening for a very long time. Now, that is one group that wants to control the world completely and have been for a very long time. Now they're being challenged by China and by a potential Europe that wants to unite. See, up until in the past, they united Europe to basically use Europe as an anti-Soviet thing. Once the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia wanted to work with Europe and all that, there was the potential. While America was away in their terrorist wars, they didn't keep their hand on they weren't noticing this, and Europe disarmed and actually got into bed with Russia and China. And America realized, shit, we need to create a crisis. We need to break these apart, because if the Europeans with the Chinese, with the Russians unite into one big trade bloc, which is what Germany was pushing, Merkel was pushing, if that happens, what happens is we don't control the world anymore. They do. Got it? So basically, this is a strategy dreamt up in London, and basically the hillbillies with guns, which is the Americans, are basically putting into action. That's what's really happening. Just so you know really what is really happening, because nobody really gets the story right. Pretty much, this is an existential threat to the US dominance, to the dollar dominance. And when we're talking dollar, we're talking euro dollar. Remember, the City of London deals with all euro dollar denominations. That means all the credit that flows into Europe, the U is actually out of London. That is the US dollar denomination where the transactions happen, because everything's transacted in US dollars. Got it? They don't want that dominance to go away, because if they lose that and the euro becomes like the standard of exchange, is what the Russians were trying to do by going over to euro and the gold. And the Chinese were basically de-dollarizing as well and going over to euro, and actually have even created their own digital currency recently, their central bank. They still haven't created a proper, basically bond market. So, they're called capital markets. Bond markets are called capital markets. They still haven't produced a proper capital market that has the confidence of investors around the world. If that ever happens, you can see that investors will move to other centers, because very wealthy people don't really care as long as they basically have stability. They have no, elites, they don't have loyalties to nation states. Let me put it, all populations. We're all basically the same to them, are globalized citizens that basically can be controlled, and they can be used or abused or whatever else. That's the reality. So that's really what's happening. The US has realized that this, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to basically break up all these relationships between Europe, China, and Russia, and basically force the Europeans back into under the umbrella of Uncle Sam. That's what really is happening. They lost positive control of these people. That's what's really happening. And that's really the reality. You can actually see it. Even some of their people are talking about, the threat to the dollar. This language about the threat to the dollar that some politicians in the US are talking about is a real threat, and they know it. And that's what all these politics, that's where they talk amongst themselves, but most people don't even get that. They don't pick up on that, what's really at the heart of this. The heart of this is basically nothing to do with Russia or the Ukraine. This is basically geopolitics. Create an enemy, recreate the Soviet Union sort of threat mentality in order to force Europe under the umbrella. That's the real purpose behind this. So the other thing is, if you think about it, if the Europe is getting cheap energy, they'll be more competitive than the US and more competitive than Britain. But they want to sell them shale oil and gas, which basically means which is more expensive, but keeps the US and Britain competitive with the rest of Europe. Got it? What do you think Napoleon and Hitler went easterly? They wanted to get the resources, the cheap resources and energy resources of Russia. Now Russia is willing to come into partnership with them and provide them those cheap energy sources without them having to go to war, which basically could create a golden age for Europe. But as long as they're under the American umbrella, the Europeans can never have a golden age. Got it? That's what's really at the heart of the thing. And the Americans don't want to lose the empire. Well, the British, the Anglosphere, the British-American sort of alliance. Greece is part of that as well, because Greece is a maritime state. So naturally, for geopolitical reasons, they ally themselves with the British. It's just natural. I mean, if I was Prime Minister of Greece, I'd be doing the same thing because they're my natural allies, because economically, I'm tied with them. It's geopolitics, people, and economics. You need to understand this. What I'm telling you is the real truth. You know, what you have to do if you're part of a certain area of geography in the world and your economic interests are tied with specific players and all that. Got it? I know it sounds bizarre, this sort of stuff. You've probably never heard it before, but this is really what it's all about. It's all been really geography. The politics of, I'm an old school at this. I started as a teenager in looking at political geography and understanding why certain countries ally with certain countries and why historically they always gravitate towards each other, because geography forces them to gravitate in order for trade and commerce. It's just always has been the case. And that's what's happening. And the US has realized that they could potentially lose a big cash cow, which is Europe. Got it? And that could be handed over to China via the Russians corridor, that Eurasian type big. And that's what they've been trying to break up. I mean, if you go back to the Silk Road, what was it? The Ottoman Empire and China, the trade between the two big empires. When the Europeans were able to go around basically the Africa and get to the Americas, eventually they were trying to get to Asia and get to the spices and all that, they cut out the middleman, who was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire declined after that, and so did China. Got it? So for China, Russia, the Ottomans, or the Neo-Ottomans as they're now, and parts of Europe and all that too, they need to break from the sea nations. You got the sea nations and you got the land nations. Got it? It's all about geography. And all these conflicts and all these sort of things that have been happening are all about geography and economic interests. That's what's really it's all about. You'll never hear this from anyone else, because this is the stuff that is talked amongst geopoliticians and people in the know. And it's hush hush, and it's used in code. They don't tell you straight out. See, I tell you, even though I'm a Greek Australian, and I've got, basically Australia is part of that maritime, so is Greece. And so I naturally tell you we're allies to the British and the Americans because of that. Not because they're great people or necessarily, anything different than any other population, but because economically, what do you think most of the Greek, Australia is heavily owned by Britain and the Americans, and as foreign investors, and Greece, most of the actual ship owners live in London. not in Greece. They holiday in Greece. That should tell you that, a lot of their investments go through the City of London. They're part of that cabal in the City of London. Got it? This is really what it's all about, guys. It's a whole lot of elites in different parts where they will ring fence their populations to be in one alliance or another based on their economic interests. Where if they really wanted us to be global citizens and all work together in kumbaya sort of situation, they wouldn't be basically trying to manipulate us and all that. They just say, let's just have a free exchange between all populations and all economies. But they don't want that. They want to control it. That's the reality. So you've got elites, big elites in both areas that want to basically, and that's how it goes. And all this agenda that we see constantly is basically to control us, to use us as a cannon fodder, and to run these agendas. It's the reality of what's really happening. And, populations are being used and abused in a number of ways. But a lot of people are unaware of this. And a lot of this is unfashionable. And, most people haven't heard of it. And most people probably may not even believe what I'm saying. I don't blame them because I've never heard of it. But I'm giving you basically the behind the scenes view. I'm even telling you what the Greeks or the Australians are doing or who they are with and the reasons they are with those people. And I'm an Australian and Greek citizen. So I'm basically putting myself out and telling you really the real story about the two people that I'm a citizen of, why they are ring-fenced in that alliance. Got it? The real purpose behind that. So, yes. What about the reports of all the bioweapon labs? They hit like 7. One of was on the Russian border. Look, there's a lot of, they usually say one thing in war or in conflict, or, the truth is the first victim. So who knows? Probably a couple of years' time, we'll find out exactly whether this happened or not, Joe. I have no idea. I don't speculate because then I jump in. I actually become a propagandist for one of the sides. And since I don't know, I basically say, well, it may have happened, but I don't know. Here in the US, many of those that are for vax were against the vax when Trump was in office. Oh, yeah, look. The reality is it's a crazy situation. People are being manipulated in a whole lot of different ways, unfortunately. Yes, they have hijacked European soccer. Well, you can see where Stefan's sort of focus is. The Champions League final move from Russia to France, and footballers being asked about the war. Unbelievable narrative manipulation. Yeah, look, it is. Yeah, but you won't be told about the real geopolitical stuff or the real money sort of tree. Who the players are and follow the money. You never get told that. You'll just be told they're bad, we're good, and the other side will be saying they're bad, we're good, and that's what's really happening. Sometimes the rest of us as citizens of the world, need to basically walk around these people and start talking to these people, because some of these people do have legitimate grievances. Not all of them are legitimate. In some cases, they are also brainwashed by their governments to believe certain things. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But you have to understand that they are just as victims as many of us are. G'day, Tracy. Oh, yeah, look, a lot of things I slept in. Then my computer wouldn't work properly. Then StreamYard decided to give me all these error messages. So, yeah, it all went tits up, as they say, really bad. I'm a bad dude, just like cornbread. Cornbread was a bad dude too. Crypto will destroy central bankers' dollars. I don't think so. Remember, they are the state. Crypto basically is a speculative Ponzi scheme. That's what it is. Because it's not backed by anything. Gold is backed by something physical, and a currency is backed by a physical economy. That is just a derivative. Cryptocurrencies are more like derivatives. They're speculative. They don't really, as long as people believe in them, obviously they can hold up their price. Don't get me wrong, their value, but it's basically an ethereal value, not a real value backed by anything. You can't exchange it with gold. It's not basically tied to gold. Now, if cryptocurrency was tied to gold or some sort of commodity and it was stored somewhere, then you could actually say, yes, there is something I can exchange my cryptocurrency for. But as long as that isn't the case, I can't exchange it for something tangible in the real world, then really, is it really something of secure? Now, banks will use crypto in the future, but it will basically be their crypto, which will be backed by their own economy, in a sense. They'll use not so much, it won't be crypto, it'll be a real currency backed by a real economy, but it will just be basically using blockchain technology, which actually makes it more secure, the transactions. And I suspect China will use blockchain for one simple purpose, for confidence, because obviously many investors don't have the same level of confidence in the Chinese compared to the Europeans or the Americans or whatever, in terms of investing in their capital markets. So if you're going to invest in a capital market, you want to have confidence. And so by using blockchain and securing it in that way, people have a bit more confidence in that regard. Yeah. So yes, the crazy thing is how they're doing it all on our dollar. We are funding their betrayal of us, pretty much, very, very much, and all that. And yes, it's pretty bad in that regard. There are other ways there could be, that countries could work and collaborate for a whole lot of things. We could basically work together and actually go into space and explore and develop other technologies that could actually advance humanity leap years ahead. But when you've got the constraints of geopolitics and what I call geography, and you allow geography to dictate your alliances and your friends and enemies, you end up basically going back to the same old bullshit, and end up in what they call the meat grinder. War is a meat grinder, back into the meat grinder each time. And in the end, the only people that win in the meat grinder are the bankers and the financiers that finance the wars by buying bonds from governments. And then you, as a citizen, pay taxes to pay back the bankers you took the loans to go to war for. Yeah, it's a virtuous circle for the bankers, whether you go to war or not. Actually, they make more money when you go to war. So, yes. Like Sweden and Israel, everyone must go through military training and called on if needed. Yep, exactly. I've got no problems. As I said, my dad was in the military for 3 years, and a lot of my relatives have been in the military and police. So, and even now, many of my relatives and even my other nephews from my older sisters are actually, some of them were considering, they don't know, they're doing other things at the moment, working other things, but they at some point did consider joining the Australian military. So on my other brother's side, they did. So yeah, I actually was a reference. Yes, I'm a good citizen of good standing in that regard. So I've got good clearance. Let's put it that way. So, but I'm critical of these things because I believe in the democracy. I believe in freedom. I believe in these things. And I'm really disgusted that the way governments are literally trampling all over these things currently. It's very unacceptable. Yes. Bjorn, good to see you, mate. Hope you guys are enjoying all this. Don't forget to hit the like button as well. So if if any of you disagreements or concerns with Putin regarding Ukraine, I think we need to, you know, the place is a tinderbox at the moment over there, and got to be very careful in this sort of chest beating on all sides could end up in disaster. What we should demand from the Ukrainian government is basically respect for democracy, the disbandment of the Nazi units. That would be a first thing, and basically fresh elections in the Ukraine, the whole of the Ukraine. Okay, reset things back to where they were. That's what should be happening before we end up with some sort of disaster over there. Yes. It is hypocrite that a lot of European states that are judging Putin are the first who have relationships with him. I still prefer the US. Yeah, me too. You know, obviously, a world under Putin or a world under Xi Jinping of China would be far more restricted. So, as I said, I still prefer being under the sort of the American umbrella, so to speak. But at the same time, I'm very critical of the American umbrella that it's becoming too totalitarian and too fascist-like. That's the concern. And my concern, my sort of this is more directed to the US subscribers. Please, please contact your senators, your congressmen, and put pressure on them to get rid of this nasty department. Because only Congress can remove such an organization. They can vote, they can get rid of it. They can say we don't need. The president can't, but the Congress can. The Congress can get rid of this nasty, evil organization they created after 9/11. They justified creating this evil organization after 9/11 and stripping people's rights. And now this organization is becoming a monster, a 1984 monster that we were warned of, that would basically strip our rights away. And if it happens in America, what happens in America then influences the rest of the democratic world around the world, Australia, Europe, and many other societies. And we're already seeing some authoritarian behavior in Austria, where they're forcing mass jabbing, whether you like it or not, or they'll literally take away a lot of your freedoms. They'll jail you. They'll actually fine you heavily. This is the problem. These are the threats, and we need to basically stop. These are the real threats that we face. Yeah, I wouldn't trust the man, but also we've basically pushed him into a corner where he's basically switched from being somebody who was seeking friendship with the West to basically being a tool now of the deep state within Russia. That is dangerous. We had a person that was basically more moderate and over time has become less moderate and less willing to work with the West. But that's because we screwed it up big time. And the European Union, on the other hand, also screwed up big time. Why did Germany invest in Russia? They shouldn't have. Why did France? They should have said, okay, let's rebalance the European Union. You've got these European states like Greece, Italy, like Cyprus. They've got all this gas in the south. Let's basically get them to basically provide the energy from the Mediterranean to flood the European market. What that would have done would rebalance the European Union. That means the southern states would be able to pay off their debts by selling energy to the north. And it would rebalance the balance of payments. It would actually normalize and stabilize the Eurozone economically. That's what it would have done, rather than seeing a whole lot of money, European money, going east. it would have been going south, rebuilding the south, and restabilizing the whole Eurozone. The European Union would be much stronger and more stable economically and politically. But they didn't do that. Very poor management at the center. And that was poor management from Berlin and Brussels. But they basically rebalanced. What we would have had now is a whole lot of gas pipelines coming from Greece, Italy, into other parts of the Eastern Europe, which is now they're trying to build these facilities, and into Western, so from Greece into Eastern Europe and Central Europe, and from basically a gas pipeline from Italy into France and into other parts of Northern Western Europe. And it would have meant that these countries would have sold something tangible, made money, and being able to pay down their debts, one thing, and rebalance the Eurozone, the entire Eurozone economically, and stabilize it. That would have been a much better strategy, and we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. Got it? But that never happened. And now we're basically in the mess we are. And still nobody's come up with a strategy to basically fix this problem, this energy problem of Europe, because that's what it is. And, the Americans are just trying to exploit it to basically sell their more expensive gas into Europe, which is fine. Obviously people want to make money. I've got no problems with that. But the Europeans could have stabilized their own region. And for America long term, it would have been much better, because it means that America would have a stable ally. They wouldn't have to basically, fund its security as much. So for America, it would have been a win-win, because it would have cost them less in the long run for the government of America, which means it would have cost the citizens of America. Now, some business people that sell oil and gas, they probably wouldn't have made the big profits that they were looking forward to making. But, at the end of the day, the government of America and the people of America are not there to basically make Texas billionaires more wealthier. They're there basically to make sure that the security of the United States and their allies actually works, and that they maintain those freedoms of those populations, which they've promoted for a very long time, and not undermine them as they're doing now. So they created all these crises, and now, in order for them not to be criticized by their own people, they are stripping people's rights away. So that's why I had to give you a bit of geopolitics to understand why they're stripping your rights away. So you understand why, because they are preparing you for a new conflict to be basically used in the grinder, in the meat grinder of war. So for them to be able to use you as the meat in the grinder, they need to basically make you hate the other side and ignore their mismanagement, because they have mismanaged. That's why they are where they are today, with with stagflation potentially and all these other problems. So they need to blame someone else, not their own misbehavior and their own failings. So they'll blame someone else, and that's dangerous politics, especially with nuclear weapons. We're in the nuclear era. When you play those dangerous politics, it's very dangerous. But that's what's being played out at the moment, unfortunately. But that's the reality, you guys. I'm trying to give you the backstory and why I'm saying certain things in a certain way. I'm very much a person who believes in liberty, in freedom. I believe in the rights to be able to express myself. This is why I get pissed off when I have my own, when I have to censor myself to some extent to remain on YouTube. It's outrageous that these things happen. So, don't know what that's all about. Or is that some? That's probably one of those sites that are basically one of those dodgy sites. Dawn. It's all one of those porn sites. Probably got malware behind it. It's a Russian. I know that's a stereotype. Putin's trying to get me. Harry, I'm Italian, and we are a lot dependent on Russian gas. Yep, Greece is as well through the Turkish pipelines. Funnily, the possibility of war is pushing us to nuclear energy, where that's here was always judged badly by the green propaganda. Exactly. That's basically it. They're actually, nuclear power takes a long time to build up to a certain level. Actually, they're actually using diesel, oil, some of the worst carbon polluters because they got caught with their pants down. Yes, yes. The Green New Deal in Russia, in Europe and the US, yes. Pretty much that bullshit is what's created a lot of these problems as well. This geopolitical sort of rivalry and yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's safe. It's, I mean, what happened in Fukushima was a rare, crazy. Those power stations were very old, and they were supposed to be decommissioned and didn't get decommissioned. There was actually a big file about that, and there was some of these safety issues were actually identified in that pre-decommissioning program, but the government basically wasn't willing to put the money in again because there was pressure by people. Oh, we don't want any new nuclear power stations and all that sort of pressure, and as a consequences, they had to keep the old ones going because you still need energy to run keep the lights on. So again, the green propaganda left a vulnerable system in place. It's the same thing. All these vulnerabilities that have been left in Europe and North America, again, as a consequence. That's why oil and gas has gone through the roof. Again, the Green New bullshit. So, yes, I hope I'm giving you deep thinking because a lot of you probably have never heard of this sort of stuff. I look at geopolitics. I read the magazines of the elites, like the Foreign Affairs and other things, the Council of Foreign Relations. These organizations, they talk about all this sort of stuff. And even recently, I put up something, because what was it? Tristan from Primal Edge, he had a thing about the US back in the past about some of their agendas and all that. And I put up the Kissinger documents, a link to them. They're actually on my drive, so people can actually look at them. If people haven't looked at them, all that. But give me a sec. Just disabled my phone. It's becoming pathetic. Yeah, look, I'm just trying to give you basically some deep thinking and understand some of the stuff that really is behind a lot of this sort of stuff. The reason why politicians talk in a certain way, why they're saying certain things, there's a reason behind it. They are captives of geography. Once you understand why they are saying certain things because they're captives of geography, then you understand really why certain alliances and why certain people think in a certain way or whatever. It's not accidental, you know. Time to start learning about crypto exchanges and hot and cold wallets. Inflation is not a merciful force. Neither is deflation. Both can be quite horrendous depending on what's happened. But inflation can really, a lot of people can lose a lot of wealth, and others can acquire a horrendous amount from those people. They're called bankers. One could be evil and suggest that it's not a surprise that a cartographer sees geography as key to everything. Ah, yes. Well spotted, DC. Well spotted. But I was basically a student of political geography as a teenager before I became a cartographer. Maybe that drove me to become a cartographer for that reason. So, yes, I I hear there is a crypto wallet that cannot be hacked. I thought blockchain couldn't be hacked. We must all move away from the dollar. Look, I wouldn't want basically to go to the yuan. Let's put it that way. Under any circumstances, but I think the careful what you wish, Joe. If the US ceased to become the reserve currency of the world, you guys have got massive debts. Your creditors are going to be starting to ask for them. That means your welfare state's going to implode, and your society's ability to pay will actually be heightened in terms of taxes. So careful what you wish for. Having a reserve currency gives you, now you've misused it. That means you've abused the reserve currency status. That's a different thing. And you need to basically stop abusing the reserve currency status in that regard. But, careful what you wish. Things could end up much worse for the US population. The reserve currency gives you, let's say, the capacity of getting cheap credit. Without the reserve currency, things would be very much harder than they are currently in the US, because the bankers have always got a way to get out of the go elsewhere and get out of the difficulties. The US people can't. You're lumped with that debt. What you need is to basically stop expending so much on your military. You're out budgeting most people around the planet, and you basically need to shift towards working with your allies, encouraging your allies to basically lift their levels of investments. What Trump was doing was right. I mean, Trump still looks for the wealthy, but what he was trying to do is getting the Europeans to pay more for their defense was a good idea, because it will actually take a bit of the burden off the US population, and then the US population could basically redirect some of that wealth towards rebuilding roads, infrastructure. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of Americans, that don't have the capacity to basically get the best education or whatever. Now, if you can direct a lot of that money to poorer neighbours and poorer communities to get technical education, so encourage children in the Appalachians, children in poor areas of the US, to get free education in technical fields, in learning technical work, because you're lacking tradespeople, and then investing in rebuilding bridges, roads, a whole lot of infrastructure in the US. What that would do is actually put billions and billions of trillions of US dollars back into the economy. It would also create good tax-paying jobs that pay well, and you'd also get a lot of these young people in a lot of these cities off the drugs, off the social media, off the all this other station, and actually becoming productive members of the society again, and middle class. You'd grow the middle classes again in America, like you did after the Second World War. And you'd basically change and revitalize the country. It basically would be built again. That's what's really required. But as long as you're basically spending, and you need to shrink the banking sector to some extent over time, prior to what it was before, it was about 10 to 15% of GDP. Now it's something well over 40. It's nearly becoming half the economy. When the banking sector becomes so big, it becomes parasitic. It needs to drive up debts. It needs to make more people indebted in order to basically finance its own growth. It grows. Banks grow through making other people indebted. Got it? So the more debt you generate, that's how you grow banks. That is parasitic. It becomes parasitic over a certain size. Banks should never grow beyond 15% of GDP, of your total economy. So when it becomes far too big, it becomes a problem. So we need to basically shrink the banking sector over time. You need policies that basically try to revitalize industries and productive capacities within the economy and shift your economy. That would create, as I said, good paying jobs, middle class jobs, and actually put a lot of those working class people who are living in slums in America in poverty at the moment, who don't even bother registering as unemployed because it's useless, who are out of mainstream. They would come back into mainstream, criminality would go down, and drug abuse and all these things would go down. They would be sorted because you'd have a lot of people back being productive, rebuilding America. You basically need politicians that will rebuild America. And if you do that, a lot of these issues will go away. Remember, I'll give you an example. After the Second World War, your country, the US, had a debt to GDP of 244%. Are you aware of that? Most people aren't. That means more than double what it is today, your debt levels. You know how they solved it? They basically invested heavily in the population, massively in the population, building new industries, new economies and all that, new manufacturing, new structures. And on top of that, they taxed the super rich heavily. I mean, the top marginal rate got up to 93%. Most people don't know that. In Australia, it got up to, because Australians followed a similar thing, and it got up to about 67%. And that's how they paid the war debts off. So if you want to pay off the peace debts off, which these people benefited the most, they should be made to pay, because they, through the debts, actually made the biggest wealth over the last couple of decades. Let them pay, like they paid back in the 1960s and 50s and all that, and basically brought debt levels for the United States and Australia down to very low levels. I know it's not fashionable to tax the rich heavily, but that's what we did back then, and basically eliminated all the debts. Because at the end of the day, do you think the rich, Bezos or Gates, actually makes the wealth? No, the people that work for him make the wealth. And a whole lot of other people create the infrastructure around that makes things work. It's bullshit. This sort of rational economics, this sort of economic freedoms for the rich is bullshit. There's no trickle-down economics. It's just trickle up to their own pockets. That's all it basically is. The golden years of capitalism, where the middle class grew rapidly and became, this sort of middle class paradise in the 1950s and 60s up until the 70s, and then they used basically the oil crisis of the 1970s as an excuse to reset the system. They're trying to do that now again. That's why it's a big threat. This point in history is the inflection point. We can either go to a dystopia or we can go to a better society. It's up to us whether we say enough is enough. We're not going to allow these bastards to basically send us to a dystopia where we will own nothing. We'll be global citizens, well, within their controlled meaning of global citizen, and basically they will have us on kibble and owning nothing. Well, they'll price us out of existence by using these methods that they've used for quite a few decades of cheap printed money. Debt, this accumulation of debt, this massive accumulation of debt needs to be resolved in the US. It's way too high. And the American people need to take back their economy and their society off the elites, the rich, the Gates of the world, the Bezos of the world. They need to tax those bastards heavily because they make shitloads. And it's about time they were sorted. one way or another, then you could reset the system. You'd bring the debt levels down and rebuild the middle classes in the US. You'd be able to flood with all that money coming from those rich people who took it from everyone else and pay even less tax than many of their people that work for them. That's how ridiculous it's become in the US. The tax dodging is beyond a joke. It's like a national pastime. When these people start paying their taxes properly, then the whole society can be reset properly, where investments can go back to rebuilding the middle classes like they did in the 50s and 60s, can be redone again. Obviously, you're not going to build the old industries. You'll build new high-tech industries and a whole lot of other things. You'll invest in, way more sophisticated stuff, maybe into a new, a space project as well, and all sorts of things like in the past. Advancing all sorts of areas of human endeavor. So it's really up to the American people. You're at an inflection point. You can either go down the authoritarian dystopian path, or you can basically rebuild a new middle class future. It's up to you Americans. And you could be a beacon for the rest of us, like you were in the 50s and 60s. But if you don't do that, the rest of us, we're all in deep shit. That's the truth, and all the other bullshit is just bullshit. No, they won't. They won't. Yeah, exactly. If you Google that, you'll find actually that these organizations existed. We're actually supporting a bunch of Nazis, just in case people don't know. That's who we are supporting. G'day, Shell. My favorite US citizen, Shelley. Yeah, General S. Patton said, "We've defeated the wrong enemy." Yes, very interesting character. Maybe. Yes. He was a very interesting character. Let's put it that way. Centralized finance versus decentralized finance. That is just one of many crypto helps with. It's not actually. It is basically very much like the derivatives market. It's not a very look. I'm not against crypto. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. But I also think that there is a lot of vulnerabilities and that a lot of hype that's not justified. It's not backed by anything. And if people all run for the door, it's going to collapse, like any derivative market. So there are a lot of risks associated with. That's what I'm saying. Having a bit there, just for a rainy day, may be a good idea. But you've got to be very careful and be quite cognizant that if it goes south, it will go south very fast. And you have to be prepared to lose a couple of thousand. But if you put a couple of thousand there just for a rainy day, because we don't know. These are very ethereal things. They're not backed by, they're not like gold. If I want to actually put money aside, I'll get gold. I'll get gold and silver coins, because they are something that I can transact with. They are something that can be used as an industrial, for industrial uses. So they have utility since antiquity, since very ancient times. So I'm a bit of an old, I sort of less of a crypto, more gold and silver sort of person. Anyway. Oh yeah, Biden can. Remember the old saying: if you scratch one of these type of people, you'll find a fascist. Sort of so the far left, far right sort of a coin. Yes, they're both authoritarian in their thinking, and so yes, let's not forget, even in Russia, there are Nazis. I know Russia that got so far right and far left are very much the opposite side of the coin nearly. They got very similar thinking. Let's put it that way on a lot of things. Oops, don't do that to me, don't do that. Fiat dollar is the same as monopoly money, not worth the paper it's printed. Actually, yeah, look, if a nation debases their currency, it's not a good thing. We give it value by believing in it, exactly, while they control the precious metal markets through their fake paper contract. Yep, there's a lot of truth in that as well. I wouldn't disagree with you. But at the end of the day, we can say these things and argue these things. But at the end of the day, we still need viability. We still need an economy that works. We still need to transact. You can't transact with gold. You can't transact. And is the gold standard a perfect standard? No, because even in the past, we had gold standards and they were debased by politicians. That's the problem. We need to basically get the right people in. If we don't get the right people in, we end up replaying the same story, unfortunately. Exactly. And that's how, I've grown up with that sort of thing. There's actually a Greek saying, eleftheria e thanatos, freedom or death, that the Greek rebels called out. And it's even a thing that is invoked, And so it is core of my belief system. And if it's not the core of your belief system, why not? And unfortunately, look at what Trudeau's been saying. Remember, he's actually been caught saying that he likes the heavy-handed approach of the Chinese government to restrict, that sometimes restricting liberties is a good thing for society. Well, for whom? For us or for you and your elite friends? Yeah, I suspect for his elite friend and mates that he looks after. So Trudeau is a fascist. Let's be quite clear about this. Biden and Trudeau, they may not look like Hitler with little moustaches, but they are fascist, both of them. They are trying to strip people's rights away, and they are trying to basically, by stealth, because we are democratic societies that have grown up believing in freedom, by stealth and creating enemies. There's these online enemies, there's these other enemies we need to protect you from. So we need to strip away your rights, but we don't say it that way. We need to take action against these people. And when we take action against these people, your freedom will be protected. It's just playing on words. These people are trying to strip the rights away of people via stealth. It's no different. The Soviets later on, after the Stalin period and all that, which was, a lot of people were being knocked off left, right, and center. When the other Soviet leaders took over, they realized you can't do this. You need to basically, control the population through propaganda and taking out people that are criticizing the government. So as long as you eliminate the critiques, remember, the Soviets changed from knocking off people to imprisoning their opponents. Taking out the people out of society so they can't criticize the government and keeping the propaganda machine going is exactly what's happening in the West now. You've got CNN and all these other media, the government propaganda. And then you've, on the other hand, they haven't actually, they will start putting restrictions on other media on, this is an agenda to control other media, which is a bit independent from the government. So they'll basically restrict that media and then they'll have total control. This is how the Soviets did it, how the German Nazis did it, how all these groups do it. What they do is they say there's an enemy, then there's an internal enemy inside the country that we need to control. And so eliminating all these voices then allows you to basically, people won't even realize that they're living in a fascist state. If you went to Germany in the 1930s, you would have gone through some areas, and people went on holidays in there, and it looked like clean roads and because they'd actually imprisoned everyone that disagreed with the government. So everything looked really nice and neat and really nice and civil. But the problem is there were no voices anymore. There was only one voice, and that was the leader and his cronies. And so most people just saw, oh, yeah, it looks really nice. Germany's really nice, really stable, really all that. Everything really is well managed. That's when you should be concerned, when you can't hear anyone opposing the leader or saying something different than the narrative. That's when you need to be concerned. It's like basically when people turned up in North Korea, everything looked really nice and neat and everything like that. They always say how neat it was, how nice the people were, always smiling and all that. Well, they had no option. They had to smile. Otherwise, they'd end up in the gulag. You never saw the gulag. You just saw the facade. And that's what they're doing. They're creating a facade and they're eliminating their opponents. Their opponents are people like me who basically disagree with their policies because I believe in freedom. I'm a Democrat. But we don't want democratically minded people. We want to silence the democratically minded people and we want to eliminate them off social media, out of the society, and then we want our narrative to be pushed. This is the slow movement towards autocratic and authoritarian regime in America. It's frightening. I say to my American friends, you need to stand up against these people. You need to basically put the pressure on your politicians while you can to get rid of Homeland Security. You need to absolutely remove that department completely. You need to organize a campaign to get rid of Homeland Security. That's what you need to do. That's your mission if you feel like you want to take it on. And then that little explosion from Mission Impossible. I should have done a little video of that. That would have been nice. Loki, you should have done a video for me. Do a Mission Impossible video. Image. Do a Mission Impossible image sort of thing. That'd be nice. If you wish to take on this mission against the deep state. Pondering going to watch the sunset. The horizon is cloudy. Fair enough. Hey, Shelley. G'day, Jonathan. Good to see you, mate. And Ness, I think I did say hello to you earlier, did I? Hope I did. The Patriot Act was a bad deal. It only hurts the good PPLs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all these sort of things are basically, you're not patriotic enough. I don't need legislation to tell me I'm a good patriot or not. I love my country. I'll fight for it if I have to, for real reasons, when it's really threatened, not when the government goes and pokes another country deliberately to create a threat when there wasn't a threat there in the first place. Because they want to basically cover all their other misdeeds, say, oh, there's a new enemy. Focus on him or her or whatever. Don't focus on me where I've screwed your life up in all these other ways with the Green New Deal and many other nonsensical stuff. Yes, here's a windmill and be happy and focus on the enemy over there. Exactly. You damn conspiratorial people. I'm very suspect about the Ukrainian Russian news. Yeah, I wouldn't trust either side. You're not going to get really objective truth from either the Ukrainians, the Russians, or the Americans at this stage. Everybody's lying to an extent. It's sort of reading between the lines. You may understand. It's what I was trying to explain earlier about the geopolitics, some of the background stuff and all that, why we're here at this point and what's happening, and the energy crisis and the energy politics that are being played in the background and what Europe should have done and didn't do and all these sort of things. Because you've never heard this stuff. I need to give you a bit of a backstory, why we are here and why we're being played now, rather than real solutions. Europe isn't coming up with solutions, and neither is America. They're using this sort of situation to basically, again, put us in the meat grinder for their own selfish interests. That's the problem. When we have better solutions in America and Europe to basically get things sorted out, even in Australia, we could invest here heavily in developing a northern corridor to basically connect the north and the west part, and because there are synergies, there are different minerals and stuff. We could actually move them between the two and actually set up big industries to build high quality steel and other products in Australia. We also could actually develop a big corridor, a national corridor, a high speed rail that actually could reduce the distances and also improve the productivity of Australia, which productivity enhances the wealth of the society. When you lift productivity, you lift that. But these sort of things aren't being looked at all. There was a guy from one of the sort of conservative parties years ago, Tim Fisher, that promoted this high-speed rail, and I agreed with that. That was a really good policy. Even though I didn't vote for his party, I still agreed with that policy. It was a really good policy, but nobody took it up. So, yes, unfortunately. Well, probably one reason was they never had representatives in Tasmania. But anyway, it's a side issue. But he had a good policy there on rail. Unfortunately, it's gone by the wayside. I hope somebody takes it up. Somebody actually from the other party, the Labor Party, they actually took it up. I'm trying to remember who the guy was that took it up, and then it really didn't go any further. Unfortunately, I'd wish that both sides of politics and would sit down and say, what are the important things to basically improve the nation's infrastructure, provide better jobs for a lot of working class people, what would actually help, improve different regional centres and stuff like that in Australia. There's no vision. There's no bloody vision. The only thing there is COVID and more COVID restrictions and more nonsense and crap like that. It's bloody crazy. And then we're seeing these crazy things coming out of the US where they want to strip people's rights away. That sounds like a good thing. I've actually got Evian water, 146 parts per million. Yours is probably lower in deuterium than mine. Favorite drink. I heard what you wrote. I couldn't agree more, Harry. I'm an American and I'm sickened me what is going on. Yeah, look, it would me as well. If I was an American citizen, I would be in absolute angry with the situation. I would be demanding that my congressman and my senator, act against this organization. I think this organization needs to go, personally. That's my personal opinion. Whether it can be reformed, I don't know. Usually in an organization that's very corrupted in its thinking, very anti-democratic in its thinking, it needs to go because it's a corrosive element. It's like having a little fascist, like a little Hitler in your government. They're always going to be nasty and corrosive and undermine the system. You can't basically turn a nasty thing into a good thing. It's like, something that's evil is going to get more evil. You really need to take the evil out. You need to remove it from the scene. And I think the only way the United States is going to basically restore the way it was in the past, more like the way it was in the past, a freedom-loving society where people felt comfortable to be able to express themselves. The only way that is going to happen is if you eliminate. You've got law enforcement. You've got basically the police. You've got the pretty much the FBI and organizations like that. You've got organizations that deal with foreign threats. That's their role. And also the role of the CIA is to basically do the intelligence and identify these foreign groups overseas, not to fund them, and keep them going. That's where the problems lie. See, I think the CIA needs to either be reformed or removed and a new agency created to basically look, all countries need to keep an eye on what's happening abroad. You need to know what your friends and enemies are doing abroad, so you basically know to make decisions, political decisions as a country. There's nothing wrong with having intelligence, but it's when they basically start getting into bed with very nasty characters, that's when you've really got a problem. That's when really these people are no longer serving your interests, and as an American citizen, they are serving other vested interests, very narrow vested interests of elites. I wouldn't go completely burn it to the ground. No, not that far. There are good elements within the American system. You need to keep those. You need to remove the really dangerous elements, and they are the ones that you need to remove from the system. When you guys do that, so you don't want to, the old saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a dangerous thing when you do that. When you burn everything to the ground and throw everything away, you can end up with a fascist dictator, because you've got nothing else left. The strong man will take over. Very, very dangerous for that. But what we need to do is eliminate the organizations that are undermining our freedoms. Yes. Yes, that organization probably definitely needs to be burnt to the ground. Yes. 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 I'll actually show that. That definitely is the thing. Yes, I would completely agree with you. That is very much a criminal organization. It's been involved with the mafia. It's been involved in bringing narcotics into the US to fund organizations around the world. That's how it actually funds organizations, by running drugs. Remember the drugs and the actual money for Contras with basically the Iranians. That's who they get. They'll get into bed. They say, oh, the Iranians are really bad people, and then the CIA gets involved with the Iranians, sells them arms in order to get weapons to basically run their own little agendas around the world. That's the problem with these people. They need to be removed, because in the past, intelligence actually did their role, kept an eye on what happens abroad in other parts, and then informed it back. Yeah, CIA hired Nazis back in the days. Can't forget that. Yeah, exactly. Not only did they hire Nazis, Shelley, but they also, restored the mafia in Italy. They actually, when they took over Italy and Sicily, they actually put the mafia back into business. That's why today the mafia runs most of it, large parts of Italy. And it's only in very recent years that they've been weakened slightly, but they still have very strong tentacles within the Italian political system. Again, because the CIA funded them at the end of the Second World War, and they got into bed with the mafia in the US to protect their ports in the Second World War as well. So yeah, they've been up to their eyeballs collaborating with the nasties of the world for some time, and then they wonder why their population is pissed off with them. You're justified, because I want my intelligence force to be a clean force. I've actually got relatives that are in that sort of environment. Got it? So I'm not against those organizations. I'm against these organizations going rogue and no longer serving the population of the country that they belong to, and getting involved with very nasty characters. That's where I've got a problem with that sort of stuff. That means that these organizations need to be either eliminated or reined in or replaced with new people that you can trust. And the other thing is, Homeland Security, I don't think, can be reformed. The whole notion that you need to basically, have this heavy-handed protection over the population is what Homeland Security is about. It's become basically a domestic enforcement agency that controls every aspect of life in America. Yeah, look, they're demonic and corrupt, these organizations and the people that they serve. These need to be excised out of the US administration, out of the US system, because, you know, they are causing a lot of problems for a lot of people around the world, but also in America. The reason why Americans are hated by a lot of people around the world is not because the Americans are bad people. The Americans are good people like all people around the world. Actually, I have a lot of American friends. I consider the American people my friend. But their political leaders and masters and these nasty organizations are the ones that go and do evil things in your name without even your knowledge, and then basically give you guys a bad rap, where you're scared to go to certain other countries because they hate Americans. But if you, it's like, look at what's happening when the Russians were doing, like, their own spying over the internet and all that. Look how much they were demonized in the American media. Well, what do you think happens when Americans go and do mischievous things like the CIA and all these other in other countries? Well, people are going to basically be doing the same towards you. If you don't, it's like, if you do a nasty thing, other people are likely to do something nasty to you. It's, if you don't want nasty things, if you don't, if you treat people with respect, they'll treat you with respect. If you treat people with disrespect, they'll treat you with disrespect. It's just the nature of humans. But yes, you guys are pretty cluey anyway. Just going to make sure I didn't miss anything that Lukey put up. Yes, don't forget, Lukey, we need that special little thing that we talked about earlier. Nuclear is one of my obsessions. Look, I think nuclear power now is really has a lot of potential. It's much safer than it used to be. That's true. We've come a long way. Current systems are very safe in comparison to the past, and could be used to basically provide a lot of cheaper energy. I don't subscribe to the carbon shit, to that nonsense, but I would rather have more of that carbon available for the kibble eaters, because they still need their kibble, petrochemical inputs into the agriculture to produce their kibble. And I feel so, if we use nuclear, then there'll be more fuel around for the kibble eaters to continue. Or maybe we shouldn't. Yes, I'll leave you that to ponder that. Depends. It depends, my dear, how much you need on in terms of taurine. If it's basically against the current current situation, you probably need about 4 grams. If you're basically young, you probably only need, for performance, probably 2. If you're older, you may need up to 4 to 6, depending on how much you consume as well. So it's all that sort of factors as well that play into it. Yes, he has done really well, hasn't he? uh, Probably. Luke Oppenheimer. Bloody hell, you guys. You're a bunch of comedians. Yes, exactly. And he was right on that point. Many others he wasn't, but on that point he was. I disagree with his policy about lowering taxes for the rich. They pay too little as it is. Fatphobic activist. I'm a certified militant fatphobic activist. Nice one. Oh, God. I'm your general also it causes intestinal problems, aka trots. No, it actually doesn't. It actually improves your long term. It will improve your intestinal stuff. But if you've got things like, let's say, you take high doses and you've got a gallbladder issue, I can tell you, you're going to start having some issues. It will accelerate the healing, and depending on how much you take, you'll go through this sort of cycle but eventually, when you get through the cycle, and your bile ducts get cleared out of all the sludge and all the actual gallstones and stuff like that, it's flowing properly, because it actually taurine is required to produce. That's what the babies use, primarily taurine, to produce their own bile salts. So you need that. But if you've basically got problems, digestive, pre-existing issues, yeah, it can be a bit until it all settles down and sorts itself out. So at your sort of, I don't know what your age is and stuff like that, you probably only need, if you're middle-aged, I'd say you probably only need about, at a maximum, 4 grams. If you're younger than that, probably 2. If you're older than that, maybe. It depends also how much meat you're consuming. So if you're consuming a good level of meat, you may only need 2 grams, even if you're in your middle age. And if you're older, if you're eating sufficient meat on a carnivore diet, you probably only need 3 grams, maybe 4, if you want to biohack, for senescence. Remember, we've accumulated a lot of senescent cells. We may want to knock off more senescent cells, so to enhance removing. It's not as good as senolytics, but it still helps along, getting rid of some of the old cells that need to be removed, so to speak. It will remove some, but not all. It's not like a blunt instrument like Physatin is, which it knocks off quite a few. So that's the sort of difference. Really, because you've got similar dimensions to my youngest sister, so. Yep, most do. Unless you've basically got a gallbladder issue, then you do notice it in a very different way. But once it resolves itself, then things get way better. It's usually, it doesn't actually affect your digestion. It actually is a good thing for your digestive system. It actually improves your digestion. But if you've got a gallbladder issue, because it emulsifies the bile and you're still some stuff coming out, you may get better clearance, but that's also going to create a bit of, for probably a couple of months, a bit of, until it all clears out properly. So it's just one of those things. But that's if you've got a underlying gallbladder issue. But it's still good for it, because eventually it will clear it out. Yeah, it can be a bit annoying for a couple of months, but then I went through that, and then once it's cleared out and your gallbladder is functioning properly, then yes, things do improve. Yeah, we do still doing. The people are still getting on the Christmas one and all that, and reusing that. I will shut it down, and I will start doing the regular ones soon. So I said to Richard from New Zealand that I will eventually pull the plug and we will go back to the normal sort of, yeah. So he knows about it. And Sammy from the UAE and a few others that jump on there, Tracy that jumps on there she's from an Australian lady that jumps on there, and Paul from the south, further south from me. So yeah, I've said to them that we're gonna go back to the regular Zoom sessions, and I'll start promoting them through my community channel. So that will go back. We'll go back to that soon. So that I've probably next week, I'll get back into the normal sort of thing. I just have to work out the time things that I did last time and see whether that's a practical time slot. I'm going to change it slightly, but I will make an announcement through the week exactly how I'm going to redesign it. So I haven't actually finalized the design of how the Zoom sessions are going to be, and then they're going to be on a regular basis from then on. So they'll be a regular basis, then I'll kill it off, and then I'll start a new session, and I'll be just doing these sort of things on, off, on, off, on, off. So that's how it's going to work. So it'll run it'll start a run for a whole week, and then that'll have killed off, and then I'll start a new one. So it'll still be available, so people can still jump on it as willy-nilly through the week. So if they want to interact with people, and it'll just be basically a new one recurring continuously. The other one will be taken out and a new one produced. So that will allow for constant sort of refreshing in people's mind that it's available and stuff like that. So that's how it's going to work. And I may even get Richard to sort of manage it through the week. So I need to look into how I can actually add him into my list of people that manages. So yeah, something along that. So we'll see how it works. I still will be interrupting because it's a master regulator. It is one of the most ancient of ancient homeostatic regulators within the body. Goes all the way back to the early eukaryotic cells lines that all life comes from on this planet. So yes, very important, very ancient stuff, and in very important stuff which we don't get enough in our diet nowadays, unfortunately, for a whole lot of reasons. Is that what they say? You'll own nothing and be happy. Ah, yes, very, very happy on kibble. Oh, yes, high quality kibble with a lot of toxic seed oil to give it extra flavor. Yes. Maybe it's just me coming off my 72-hour fast the other day. Good for you. I do feel a lot better, and I'm having noticeable energy improvements with a taurine on board, still recovering from the jabber. Yes. Unfortunately, with all these sort of pressures that we've been being put up, keep up your vitamin D levels, my dear, because really important to stem cell activate more stuff, so yeah, it is. It basically is. Look, a lot of us are sulfur deficient, severely sulfur deficient. And that's one of the biggest problems. Not only can't we detoxify, we don't live in an ancestral life. Let me just make that quite clear. The only reason why I have a certain supplements, and they're all amino acid based supplements, they're not accidental. They're quite clear. I've got wires running against this wall. That's non-native EMF. I've got screens here bombarding me with blue light and electromagnetic fields from the computers and everything else. All that sort of stuff, these non-native EMFs, frequencies and other things, are doing deleterious things to my body. They're also depleting because these things also, your detox pathways are using sulfur amino acids. You've got exposure to all sorts of pathogens in the environment that are depleting sulfur. So we've got all these things, and as a consequence, our sulfur levels are much lower. Then most food is processed to the nth degree, so there's none of this sulfur amino acids in there. So pretty much the majority of the population is very taurine poor, has been for a very long time. So when you do put taurine in, initially, it's a bit, but eventually your body starts regulating itself much better. And people start noticing they're feeling better. Obviously, if you've still got underlying issues like your gallbladder issues and a whole lot of other things, it'll take a while until those sort of things sort themselves out. I usually go hard. I know some people can't, and I sympathize with them, and I say, okay, just go lower doses and work it over a number of months. I just go like a sledgehammer, and I just went up to 10 grams, and I just forced myself to have a lot of, until, a lot of gallstones coming out and all sorts of shit and stuff like that. And it was very uncomfortable for quite a number of weeks. But you know what? Once you're over that, it goes, oh, I'm back to doing normal poop. I'm back to basically having normal function. I've upregulated and knocked off a lot of the nasties, because it also suppresses a lot of the actual nasty bacteria and actually helps the more beneficial ones grow. So it actually improves, it re-regulates a lot of your gut motility. So you're not basically, spraying or having difficulty pushing stuff out. So it really improves the general running of a lot of systems. It's a master regulator, and it's quite cheap. And so it's good to basically help sort things out. As I said, you always need to keep an eye on for two types of medications: blood pressure meds and lithium, because it retains lithium. So if you're on lithium, you need to basically get off it and get on to taurine. So shift from one, lower one as you're increasing the other, and do it under medical supervision. Do not experiment on yourself, please. And the same thing goes for blood pressure meds. You need to come off them slowly in a controlled manner and work with the physician. And if your physician isn't willing to work with you, find one that is. Oh, not that. Oh, that one, Johnson & Johnson. That's like the AstraZeneca. Yeah, does have a few issues. That one, yes, not a good one. But anyway, if you've got really good vitamin D levels, because it is in a Dino type preparation, you can actually reduce the amount compared to the nanoparticle ones. It probably isn't as bad. Does have tends to have a clotting thing. So I hope you're on L-citrulline for vasodilation, to vasodilate your. And if you haven't got L-citrulline yet, just go to a bodybuilding sort of business that sells supplements for bodybuilders and all that, and they sell L-citrulline. It's a vasodilator. You need it. It's a bit like a blood thinner, like aspirin is. So take 2 grams, one in the midday and one in the evening. And the reason why one in the evening is because before you go to sleep, is because your blood tends to coagulate in the evening. Okay. Oh, is he? Okay. I'll be off shortly. I was intending to go up to 10 o'clock. So yes, I'll be off. Thanks, Scotty. Appreciate it. Let's get through this. Yes. So basically, yes, improve. Yes. Unfortunately, people are being forced into things which they don't want. Again, these mandates. Yes. We'll just move through there. Yep. I understand how you feel. Yeah. I believe in the people, not in some crazy bloody government. Yep, that's true. That's true. Much harder. You tech giants. Joe, you're a tech giant. Yes, I'm an old-fashioned person. I like to be able to feel the stuff and keep it stored away safely. Well, that's another reason why a lot of people are using it for energy as well. They use it like a pre-workout, a couple of like an hour before, um, and they also use L-citrulline as well as a vasodilator, which also enhances blood flow into the muscles. So, yes, to be able to do stronger workouts, that's a different thing. Most people probably don't need that because they're not bodybuilders. But probably for the jabber situation, you probably do need it as a vasodilator to use something like L-citrulline. Yep, yep. Okay, that is a long list. I'm going to do a video on that. It's a very, very long list. I'd be here for about an hour or more just telling you. And at 15 minutes, Bart's K's studying his, and we'll be shifting over to Bart's live stream. So, but I will do it. It does a lot in the brain. For children, it actually helps grow their brains. You know, does a lot of wonderful things. Aminotransporting, detoxing, methylation, you name it, it does it. Resets your electrolytes into a homeostasis, your gut into homeostasis. Does all these wonderful things. It's fantastic stuff. It's the Swiss Army knife of the body, and it's one of the most ancient of ancient things. Yes, the way the current is. But remember, you'll own nothing. They'll own everything. Uh, so, yes. Yeah, it does help with muscle cramps because it basically regulates the electrolytes in your body. That's why it does it. It together with, if you take a bit of sodium and you add, not you don't need shitloads, but as long as you salt a bit your meat and you get enough taurine in your system, it will re-regulate all your electrolytes to such a level. Even calcium, it will lower calcium in the brain and in the cells, which basically means they'll be less excitatory, which means you'll calm down, you'll increase GABA, and you'll actually feel better. That's why it's really good as a sleep aid. It suppresses cortisol. So if you've got high stress levels, it can actually suppress cortisol, lower cortisol, together with sodium as well. That works to lower cortisol levels. It blunts. It doesn't, eliminate cortisol. No, it just blunts cortisol levels, which is really good. Improves sleeping at night. It calms you down. So it's a good sleep aid, you could say. Ah, yes, exactly, Tracy. Exactly. The body's Swiss Army knife is exactly that. Yes, it is actually based on that. We basically must believe in it to transact. So what these people are doing is undermining that money security, unfortunately. Please hit the like button if you haven't hit the like button. Yep. And in higher concentrations in basically seafood. It's what the Japanese eat a lot of raw seafood, sushi. It's one reason they've got high taurine levels, and another reason why they had the Japanese paradox in terms of C19. That was it. Their vitamin D supplementation and the high levels of taurine in their fish that they consume. That's the Japanese paradox. I hope somebody in science would investigate these things and provide the general community. It's cheap. Vitamin D and taurine are cheap supplements. They could help a lot of people. Even if you've got a vegan friend or a vegan relative or whatever, give them taurine. and give them the one on iHerb, which is a really good quality one, and it's done by vegetarians, so it's vegan friendly for them as well, and it will basically improve their gut, because a lot of them have got a lot of gut problems and stuff like that, and gallbladder issues and stuff like that. At least until they wake up to themselves, they won't damage themselves as severely. Eggs are great. Eggs are great source of protein, sulfur amino acids, and many other things. Choline, and choline exports fat out of the liver. Yes, that is why when people get enough choline, they don't have fatty liver, even if they're on a kibble on a standard sort of semi-standard diet. Like in the past, when they had 2/3 animal foods and 1/3 plant foods, they didn't have a lot of these issues, because they were getting enough choline from the eggs to export the fat out of their liver. You could still become fat by engaging the Randall cycle, but in those days, they were more physically active, so the glycogen didn't stay around for too long to become an issue, the glucose. But at the end of the day, it's sort of really important what people do. And eggs in Southeast Asia have been every meal an egg or two. So they were getting plenty of choline. Unfortunately, nowadays they've shifted away from eggs because their experts tell them they shouldn't, and doing more sugar and stuff like that. The diabetes rates have doubled, even that of the US, and their fatty liver levels have gone through the roof as well. Because one, they're eating more refined sugars, but two, they're not eating as many eggs as they used to, which means that they don't get enough choline to export the fat out of their liver. So the fatty liver accumulation is going up in those populations. Yes, eggs are a great thing. Yeah, pretty much. Most of the media, that's what they want to shut people like me down, and Bart and people like that. They want to shut us down because they don't want people to basically be telling the stories that you people want to hear, the truth about what's happening and what's really, or at least hear a different opinion from what the government narrative is. Okay, I'm not going to get through the rest of it. Unfortunately, I do apologize to people that I've not had a chance to do that. We are going to shift over to Mr. K's channel shortly. I'll just show this image and share. Ah, yes. Very much so. Thank you, Lukey. The Mission Impossible thing. Remember the Mission Impossible theme? Uh, dealing with the deep state and then doing a runner. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for being here. Sorry about the late start and all the sort of shenanigans, sort of mess up that actually happened earlier. Do appreciate you guys turning up here and basically it's good to see that you guys are well aware of some of these nasty organizations out there, and some of they need to be reformed. They need to be dealt with. They need to be shut down, some of these organizations. I do thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Thanks for your support. And we're going to call it quits so we can get over to Mr. K's channel. So Bart K's got his channel shortly, a live stream. So we'll shift over there. See you guys. Take care. And thanks for your support. And get the message out, please. Get the message out and pass that information on to your friends and relatives and ask them to call their congressman and senator and demand that that organization is stripped. Enough is enough. We will not have the First Amendment be completely and utterly eroded to the ground. We'll have those organizations eroded to the ground before we accept the First Amendment to be destroyed by that criminal organization called, Homeland Security. Take that message to your politicians in America and people around the world. Keep an eye on what's happening with your governments. Are they adopting similar policies? You need to be very careful because they will adopt these positions. Believe me, they will. So some of the politicians, like in Canada and New Zealand, have already started these policies. So expect more of this bullshit. Take care. See you guys.